Funky Politics.
Funky Politics Show.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics.
I know a place.
Funky Politics, powered by Memphis Light Gas and Water.
Ain't nobody crying. Ain't nobody worried. Ain't no smiling faces. No, lying to the races.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm DC, sitting right along here with my trusty, confident co-host, Doc Ward. Doc, how are you, sir?
Full of confidence and pride.
Full of confidence and pride.
Full of confidence and pride. Setting humility aside so that we can bring you these real, right, and funky facts the way you need to hear them every doggone day.
Right here on Funky Politics.
There
And
you
know
go.
what? Man, we've been on hiatus for just a little bit, y'all. We've been away from you.
Yep.
Some of us have been vacationing in Jackson, Mississippi. Others in Bum Snort, Arkansas.
Others in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Well, wow, were you
Jackson,
there?
Mississippi. Yeah.
You didn't go hunting with the former vice president, did you?
Nah, man. I learned better.
I hear he's missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I know.
Nah, man. I heard you can't lose your head and go with him.
No, you can't do it. You know what, folks? Let me tell you something. Funky Politics. This brand new season coming up is going to be one for the ages. We want you to stick with us. Make sure you go out there to your podcast provider, Stitcher, iTunes, look us up, hit us up. You got to subscribe, and then when you hear something you like, make sure you like on that thing. Hit and subscribe and like. That's what we like to do. And matter of fact, our first show we're going to be coming out with here, we're going to be going back a little bit, talking a little bit about a good friend of ours, a good friend to the media, a good friend to the community, a good friend to this country, Bernal Smith, Doc. And we lost our good friend, but we're still here, and we're still here to carry on a bunch of those things that he championed in education, political activism, black business development. Doc, what do you say, man?
I say our brother, while he may be down, he is not out. His spirit survives him. He would be right here, right along with us this season if he were here. So we're going to do it the way that he would have us to do it. And we're going to make it the realest, rightest, funkiest production that we can possibly make it, commemorating everything that he was to everybody as well as we can. And, just celebrating, commemorating, while at the same time missing him all the same.
We're going to have some friends that come by and sit down with us.
Yep.
People like Eric Barnes, who's the publisher of the Memphis Daily News, Dr. Karanja, Ajanaku, the executive editor of the Tri-State Defender, Darrell Cobbins, principal with Universal Commercial Realty, and of course his fraternity brother and fellow activist along with us, the Reverend Dr. Earle Fisher. And I don't know a befitting way how not to have all of those guys in the room and talking about one of the greatest guys who walked this earth with us.
We'll be reflecting on a giant.
That's right.
There you go.
Right here on Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
I'll take you there. Hit me all. I'll take you there.
Funky Politics.
Connect with MLGW.
We can help.
Go to MLGW.com for bill payment, analysis, service transfers, outage updates, and more. Connect to us on Facebook to share comments and ask questions. Follow us on Twitter at MLGW. Connect to our blog for news and updates.
Watch how-to videos on YouTube.
Connect by downloading iPhone apps. Get text message reminders. Stay connected with MLGW. We can help.
Artivism, Best in Blue, Funky Politics, Blues in the Basement, Neighborhood Connect, Riffin' on Jazz, on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Put your hands together. Come on. I need someone sometimes to help me come and turn my life around.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm DC, sitting right along with my trusty co-host, Doc Ward. Doc, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. You
Doing
sound
good?
trusty.
Yeah, well,
I got your wallet.
so you're not that trusty after
I'm
all.
giving it back. Wasn't nothing in it.
Oh, God. No, you can have it. Pay those bills, too, by the way. We're having a little fun here, but we've been on hiatus for a minute, and we're back with you right here on Funky Politics. And in the studio, we have this afternoon with us, we've got Dr. Karanja Ajanaku, executive editor of the Tri-State Defender, and the Reverend Dr. Earle Fisher, pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church. Welcome to the program. Gentlemen, how are y'all?
Great.
Doing all right. Thank you for having us.
Well,
let's talk about the occasion.
Let's talk about the occasion. Well, you want to go ahead and cut it?
No, I'll let you go ahead.
We're here because we had a death in the family of sorts. One Bernal Smith, the second, who was a trailblazer in the media world, a trailblazer in his community, a trailblazer as an activist, and we are here just to kind of walk us through a little bit about where do we go from here. And being the executive editor of the newspaper, we want to make sure that we go in the right direction with this. We want to make sure the Tri-State is still there, even though the personality or the face of the organization is gone. But I think there are folks out there that need to know that Tri-State is still going. And Reverend Dr. Fisher, being a fraternity brother and a fellow activist with him, we just want to do a little talking. Let's just do a little conversating back and forth about the man himself.
Absolutely. I want to definitely yield to Dr. K, who was working with him on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to say is that people should be assured that the newspaper is going on.
Yeah.
You know, that if you got to pay tribute to Mr. Smith, then you would know that he'd put something in place that's designed to go forward. I mean, his legacy was about continuity in terms of getting us from where we were, coming in and buying the paper. So he set something up to go on. So, you know, we are owned by Best Media Properties. There's a board in place, and at the proper time, you know, we'll let people know about what the specifics are in terms of how we intend to address the future. Right now, we're just dealing with, as like people say, man, it's a stunner.
Yeah.
A mighty oak has fallen.
Yeah.
And I think it has left a void amongst us, and as not only his fraternity brother and his brother in activism, but as a pastor, I think it's important for us as a community to learn how to really grieve our people. Yeah. Like, it's a gift to love somebody enough to miss them when they're gone. And I don't want us to rush past this loss and this tragedy. I mean, he was what I would call the ambassador of the African American community in Memphis. Wow. He was a diplomat par excellence. Yeah. And I think that it's hard to replace that. And so we can't think that next Tuesday or next Thursday is going to be just another Tuesday or Thursday. It's going to be an adjustment period. And I'm also mindful of how people, with such a large platform that Bernal had, how people want to try to oftentimes seize the opportunity of this loss just to try to gain some type of social or political status. I think we should be a little bit leery of that too, because you can't just walk into the spaces that he walked in and not be able to produce the things that he was able to produce. So I think it's going to take some time for us to cultivate and nuance what anybody who succeeds him or anybody who takes up his mantle is going to look like, or who they're going to be.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
You said something very, very important, because you said mighty oak has fallen.
Yeah.
And if anybody that knows anything about trees, you know, oak trees are not, they're two things, if not anything else. One, they're extremely strong. Extremely strong. Number two, they get a little bit of height on them and a little bit of width on them. You know, they're not redwoods, but they get a little width. We had an oak tree once in our backyard, and we got rid of it for some reason. You know, sometimes people tend to not respect the ecology, and they want to start hacking trees and doing whatever else. We didn't realize all the things that tree was until that tree was gone.
Wow.
It provided us shade. It provided us a place to play, whether we were climbing in it or hiding in it or hiding around it. It provided beautification for our yard. And it was a place where the birds came and sang to us in the morning, woke us up in the morning. It was a center of activity. It meant so many things that we never knew until the space of that tree, where that tree was gone, I was left with the space where that tree was.
Yeah.
So when you say an oak has fallen,
I'm quoting Dr. Vincent Hardin.
When you say an oak has fallen,
so African proverb.
That I don't think truer words were ever spoken. But I mean, but if you can, because you just talked about, you admonished us not to be so quick to fill the oak with a rose garden or anything else.
Right.
Expound on that a little bit, because I think that's important for people to understand just how much, you know.
Yeah, I shared some of this on an interview yesterday on 88.5, Brother John Best. one of Bernal's former teammates at Whitehaven High School, put together a tribute. And one of the things I said was, it's good, Dr. K, for us to have footage and documentation of who and what Bernal was and what he said, because commonly we romanticize and sanitize the message of people who unapologetically advocate for African Americans, especially when you start talking about economic justice. And so one of the things I think we have to do is keep the message, not just the mentality or not just the medium of the newspaper. I am definitely here for that.
Right.
But I think we also have to keep the message of economic equity in a city that is primarily a city of African Americans, but the business community, black businesses, still receive less than 1% of the receipts. That's something Bernal made sure was at the forefront. So in order for us to righteously honor this mighty oak that has fallen, we have to make sure that the message that he often presented is one that remains at the forefront of our discourse.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Dr. K, I want to get to one point, and I want you to expound as much as you can on this. This guy was a newspaper publisher. He was this. How did he put all of that into one day? And I know you work with him on a daily basis, probably 6 or 7 days a week. How was one person able to do, a political activist over here, a community activist here, a fraternity? I mean, you saw all of this.
Yeah, well, we talked about that kind of stuff, about how could we, because we had to do a lot. We're a small operation, but and so we had to do a lot. So we talked about how can you do it, and so we started with one basic fact, and that is that we're human, that we're Homo sapiens sapiens. Yeah. We're number one down here, and he always talked about we have what we need to do to meet the challenges of the day. He talked about the need to be creative, the need to be nimble and adaptive relative to change. And so my point is that if you don't know that you had a capacity to do something, you can't get to the ability part, right? Wow. So you got to know that as human beings, we can be multifaceted and do a lot of different things. So if you let go of the idea that you can't, then you can put a process in for doing it. The other thing is that one of the gentlemen mentioned earlier that he was the out front guy. He didn't do everything by himself, right? And a lot of the things that he espoused, they certainly reflected his particular understanding of it, but there were conversations that were had before he got out there and talked about things. And when things got into the newspaper, they go through somebody. Right. They go through an editor. That's my job, right? And so he didn't want me just to be a little Bernal Smith and just correct little dots and periods, you know. And even if he did, that's not who I am. You gave him. So we had interchange and exchanges about what should go in and how should it be said and what should not. And over a period of time, we learned how to have productive conversations like that. Because one of the problems we have in the African American community is that we don't know how to have tough conversations. Right. You know, absolutely. We just don't, and then we're not transparent with each other, and we do a lot of things. We don't take minutes of the things, and so we end up chasing our tail and doing the same thing over and over again. So when one of the brothers was talking about that press conference, and we want to have a plan, I remember that conversation because when I heard there's going to be a press conference, I said, "Oh man, another one of those." So I told him, I said, "Man, where's the plan? Y'all got a plan?" You know. So when he said that he was pushing that, I'm saying, "Yeah, okay." You know. And so beyond Bernal, we have to get to that. You know, we have to have plans for things. You know, it's like. Well, let me not go on and on about it.
I would say that there is so much that you have lifted up that I think needs to be underscored. And that process, Bernal being a thought partner, a conversation partner, having conversations in rooms with people, myself included, that nobody's seen, it wasn't on the news, we didn't broadcast it on Facebook. And if we had spats in a fraternal space where people didn't know by the time we came out front. I understand your stance, you understand mine. The process of editing and publication, first, I think we should salute Dr. K, because I've seen that firsthand. Bernal told me, "Man, you can send me the stuff. I'm gonna sign off on it, but Dr. K has to give it the okay.
Right.
And what I appreciate the most, that I think we have to never lose sight of, is Bernal's commitment to making sure that these narratives and these perspectives that other outlets were trying to water down and sanitize or hush altogether.
Right.
And I've seen that firsthand. It's stuff that I've sent in other places
Right.
that they never even wanted to touch. It was too black for them.
Right.
Wow.
It was too righteous. It was too aggressive in its advocacy for the least of these.
Right.
And you send it to Tri-State, and even if Dr. K said, Pastor Earle, I need you to adjust this or go back and reword that, the perspective was prioritized.
And that's what I said earlier. There was a true partnership down there. And that's why I said I wanted to make sure people knew that the folks at Tri-State, it wasn't just Bernal. Like I said, again, the
Right.
face. But I knew, and I know what you do down there.
And it's not just me.
Yeah, Nina. You
can
get
tick 'em
countless
off,
others
yeah.
down there.
And I
he-
think that's why it's very important to know the first thing that you said, but amongst anything, is that Tri-State will continue to go
Yes.
on. It will continue to go on.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
You can't take my joy, devil. Makes me clap. Makes me clap my hands. Makes me wanna dance. Oh, you better put them hands together and have a Holy Ghost party with me.
Funky Politics, powered by MLGW, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water.
Plus one lip sync champion, Latasha Peoples.
Staring in the mirror, gonna change my ways. I wanna make Memphis a better place. I see your neighbor in need, but what can be done? Instead of buying shoes or a pretty dress with just $1 a month, you can help the rest. It starts with you. Plus one.
You know, giving back through Plus One will make a difference for families in crisis.
It starts with you. Plus one. Grandma's message couldn't have been any clearer. If you wanna change Memphis, look in the mirror. It starts with you. Plus one.
I remember when we got help from Plus One.
And now we're helping others. Hey, Memphis, you can make a change.
You too can make a difference.
Riffin' on Jazz.
I think I know a lot about jazz.
It's only what you've been doing the last 30-some years.
Yeah, I know.
A voice that can make you laugh and make you cry.
Good jazz, you don't have to worry about what they're talking about. But when they pick up those instruments, we all speak the same language. And don't you know you went in the kitchen and come back with a big bowl of salad?
Riffin' on Jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Funky Politics.
It was quintessentially a amplifier for the voice of a community, a voice of people who in many instances didn't have many other outlets that represented in any real true sense the struggle, that didn't represent in a real sense the myriad of details that represented what life was like and what this struggle for freedom and equality was really like.
I wanna follow your star wherever it leads me. I don't mind, Lord. I hope you don't mind.
Listening to Funky Politics, folks, and we are always powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm DC, one of the hosts of this wonderful show, sitting right along with my co-host, Doc Ward. Doc, what's up?
You're the captain of the vessel, man.
I don't like the way that song is going. I don't like the way that song is going. Whatever.
Take
man.
us on this fantastic.
Hey, look, man, we have got visiting with us this afternoon the Reverend Earle Fisher, pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church, Dr. Karanja, Ajanaku, executive editor of the Tri-State Defender. And we're newly back from a little bit of a summer hiatus, but we came back and the news wasn't. It hasn't been pretty in the past anyway. But then, of course, we lose one of our dear brothers here in the city of Memphis and this country, an executive vice president with the National Newspaper Association and countless other boards. One Bernal Smith. And we're sitting here having a conversation about some of the things that he championed, some of the things that we've got to continue to champion, because this thing ain't over, is it, Doc? It ain't over.
No, it ain't over.
You know, we're in it for the long haul,
Right.
and I think that's what we ought to talk about now. Some of those things we're in the long haul for, and the education piece, the political piece, the business development piece, all of these things.
There's another thing I think that Bernal embodied that we have to make sure remains at the forefront of our mind when we try to honor him, and that is his sacrificial ethic. Like, there's a lot of things that he could have seized solely for himself.
Sure.
I remember the first Fox News interview I got. It was when Boko Haram kidnapped a Nigerian girl.
Yes.
And I had organized some ministers in response to that, saying real men don't buy girls. I had Frank Robinson do a little art around it and all this other stuff. They actually called Bernal to commentate on that. Bernal said, no, I'm going to tell y'all who y'all need to call.
Wow.
And so my first interview with Fox, came through Bernal. Bernal and I negotiated this contract for me to write with the Tri-State over a game of basketball.
Wow.
And it was something that was a risk of sorts because I was, and people had known it at the time, unapologetic in terms of my presentation advocating for African Americans in Memphis and beyond.
Who, you?
No, who, me? Right.
Who, you?
Yeah, so I think he was willing to sacrifice some of the privileges that he could have hoarded for himself to make sure other people had opportunities too. And as we start thinking about the generational landscape, the relationship between the elders and some of the young adults, or the millennials, if that's what we want to call them, people who are up and coming, emerging folks, like this ethic of sacrifice, saying it's not all about me, it's about us.
Right.
That's the ethic that I think Bernal embodied.
Right, and that's so important what you just said, because it's easy for somebody to just take, like you said, all the spoils for themselves. But the other thing is, in a time where people are always trying to take the causes of African Americans and put them behind one leader. Who speaks for the black people? Who speaks for black communities?
Who the new Dr. King?
Yeah, who is it?
That's right. Who's the new Dr. King?
Ain't no
by
new Dr. King.
By virtue of giving you that opportunity, he's showing there are many different perspectives of leadership on a different point. And so that just goes to show you some of the magnanimity that was part of his collective genius.
I think one key thing that I haven't heard us talk about yet is that Mr. Smith was a family man.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you're rooted properly in family, it provides the foundation and the footing that you need to be able to move the way that you were talking about. And this man was a husband. He had 2 sons. The youngest is 13. Wow. I talked to his wife the other day, and she said, "How do you tell a 13-year-old, that your father has passed?" He had a daughter, so he was rooted. He was serious. We had serious conversations about family and what was our responsibility as men relative to our nuclear, our own personal families, and what was our responsibility as men to the African American family, and then just creating the circle out there. I want to say one other thing about him, and I know I'm sort of leading us in this direction.
You should be.
But we're riding with you.
Yeah, you're the captain of the vessel.
But this is something else that I noticed about Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
He was a younger guy than I am. I'm 62, right? Yeah. So it was a challenge for both of us. So I'm there. He comes in. He's 45. I'm 62. So I got to learn how to talk this way. He got to learn how to talk that way. Right. And so we had to work that out, right? So one of the things I noticed over time with him is that while he would speak his mind, we've all said that, right? Mm-hmm. He do his research, but he's gonna speak his mind. But here's what I noticed with him in terms of growth and development. He got to a point where he could have a monitor, in the sense that he could take in what he was saying and the feedback relative to it, and make adjustments to it. That may not sound like a big deal, but it's a huge deal. If you're a guitar player, you don't have a monitor, man, you might be on like you might not, right? You're playing one way and the band's going another. But he really learned how to take in information and make adjustments, and that's a lesson that we can all learn.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. And speaking of making adjustments, I was just in Dallas not last week, and he and I actually were talking Thursday and Friday via Facebook, and so we were trying to get some folks in to come see you all down there. And he was working up, and we worked back and forth. I'm out of town, and we're trying to make a big deal, and he texted me back. He said, "They're here." And I'm like, man, this guy really is a savior. But there was another piece we couldn't get worked out, but that's all he did. This guy take calls, man. He's working on something for you.
He was. They said he knew how to walk with kings and not lose his common touch.
That's right.
Sure.
That's right. Someone mentioned earlier that he dealt with people in all walks, and he was talking to his wife again, and she talked about how he saw all the nicks and holes in Memphis, and obviously he spoke to him, but he also saw Memphis as a diamond in the rough, you know, and he knew that the move that you need to make on a diamond to be able to get it to a level of value that people reach for. And so he saw that with individuals too. You know, we hired and worked with people at the Tri-State Defender that probably couldn't get jobs other places.
Wow.
And it's not because they weren't talented, but man, when you come out of the African American community, by the time you get out here, you done got scarred up, right?
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of places you can't get in because of those scars. Well, he would always tell me, he said, look, man, we have to be that vehicle of second choice, you know, and sometimes third choice that for people. And sometimes, you know, I go, man, I don't know, man. I've looked at this. This guy can't write. I'm telling you that, right? You know, but he said, look, just look a little bit deeper at it, and let's give it. And that's an unbelievable quality, man.
You know, you just said a major word he always used. You know what that word was, y'all? Vehicle.
Yeah.
And a vehicle does what? A vehicle moves somewhere. You can put some folks. He used it was always, man, I got to be a vehicle for something. I'm like, man, I thought about vehicle.
But you also talked about him talking with crowds and keeping his virtue, walking with kings, not losing the common touch. But there's another passage of that same poem when you just talked about with Kipling, where it talks about stooping and building it up with worn out tools, and that's what he did. But it was always a good product. And the Tri-State Defender, the media product continues to be an excellent product. So I have to ask you, because, you know, even though we will commemorate Bernal now and in weeks ahead, paper still has to be published. Stories still have to be written. The story of our community and our society right now in its divisive nature, thanks to persons other than Bernal, particularly people up at the top of the ladder, have made sure that we remain divided. You have the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King coming up. A lot of things that mean a lot of things to black people are coming to the forefront. How do we keep that going? And not just keep it going, but elevate as using Tri-State as the vehicle. You know, as Dr. K, how do we do that?
Well, first of all, as a news entity itself, we had an evolving plan about how we were going to cover the community relative to MLK 50 and some of the social issues. We had just had a big planning meeting on Tuesday about some steps about how we were going to go forward. I think I even complained that, we're in this meeting way too long, you know. But he said, hey, he
was good for a long meeting.
Yeah. They said, you know, we have to do this now because Mr. Smith was going through a change relative to the way that he looked at business and how he looked at our entity. He kept saying that, hey, look, we've made a culture shift. It's not we gotta make a culture shift. We have made a culture shift. I have made a culture shift. We're in a different place right now. And as a result of being in this place, we have to do these things. And part of that dealt with identifying specific issues and having putting people in place to cover those things. So I don't really have to reinvent the wheel relative to covering those kinds of things. I got that covered, okay, and with the team behind me. Plus, you know, part of what we were doing here is taking advantage of the fact that the industry's changing, man. And so we're engaging, we're taking advantage of some tools where we're going to be able to give the community an opportunity to sort of bring the news to us more in a way than we were before. And you're going to see a significant change relative to the newspaper like that. We're going to stay local and get even more local. And that's one thing that he and I talked a lot about, that people don't look to the Tri-State Defender to find out necessarily about what's going on in Washington. If you want to know about what's going on in Washington, we want to, and you see it in Tri-State Defender, we want to look at it through how it's affecting the people in Memphis relative to those issues.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, you'll see us doing more of that. I think also, and I don't want to get too far ahead here, because we want to keep the family in mind here, right? Absolutely. And we got to get through. We got to get through Friday. We have to be supportive for his wife and children, and then we'll get more into the specifics of what we're going to do after that. But I will say this too, that she's a strong woman, and I have just the absolute respect for her and how she's moving forward here.
Dr. K, thank you for allowing Bernal Smith to do what he did while you were doing what you were doing. And please thank his wife for all of those of us
Yes.
out here who cannot get to her right
Absolutely.
now. But we will see her soon, and we will support
Yes.
them and the Tri-State Defender.
Yeah.
I think we have to still be that vehicle. We have to be that vehicle, guys. We have to be that vehicle. And you're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Who can bring you joy? Who can turn your life around?
Artivism, Best in Blue, Funky Politics, Blues in the Basement, Neighborhood Connect, Riffin' on Jazz, on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
If I don't find something soon, my lights are going to get turned off.
How am I going to cook for these guys with no power?
I've already applied for so many jobs. I hope I can get this one so I can pay my utility bill.
What's this? Well, there's the perfect way to help my family and friends. Help someone you care about through MLGW's Gift of Comfort program.
My name is Martavius Jones, and you are listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Publications like the Tri-State Defender, but particularly because the Tri-State Defender was one of those publications that was actually based in the South, whereas more of the older publications were in Chicago and Pittsburgh and Detroit and in the northern area, and they played a tremendous role in the Great Migration and those sort of things. But you fast forward past that, as you moved into the Civil Rights era, publications like the Tri-State Defender were a tremendous voice to really help people in all communities understand what this struggle was really about.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm DC, right along here with Doc Ward, my trusty co-host. Doc, how are you, sir?
Wonderful. Ready to pick it up.
Ready to
for the
pick
new
it up?
Season, yep.
It's a new season, right? We've been on what? Summer hiatus?
That's what I said before.
Was it-
Summer hiatus.
Is it hiatus? Is that the word?
Summer hiatus.
Summer hiatus. That's
we
what
lost some brain cells, gained some pounds. Hopefully we got some perspective along the way.
But we're back.
We're back.
Sitting in with us this afternoon, we've got Brother Darrell Cobbins. Excuse me, Darrell Cobbins.
Yeah,
Who
you
is that?
rusty, man.
Darrell Cobbins.
Shake it off.
And I should know that.
Shake it off.
Principal at Universal Commercial Realty, and Eric Barnes, publisher of Memphis Daily News. Welcome to the program, gentlemen. How are y'all?
Good, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
What's got us here, man?
Well, I'll tell you what. We're just back, but we've had a subtraction from the family, not only in America, but especially right here in the Memphis community. Bernal Smith, who was a media mogul because of the thinking that this young man had. He was an activist. He was a family man. He was a friend. He was a lot to the average guy in the Memphis, and a lot of people are going to miss him, and I know especially me. And that's why we're here. We're going to talk a little bit about his legacy that he's left behind for us to try to take up the mantle and do something with. And he's gone, but we're here, and so differences can still be made.
Just the body, not the spirit, not the soul, not the work, not the dedication.
That's absolutely it.
And we've come to praise him, not to bury him like we do family. Always we praise family. So let's talk about it.
Let's get into it.
Let's talk about it, because one of the things that Bernal was really a proponent of in this community was development and the sustainability of African American business. And I know as a comrade from college with you, Darrell, specifically, that was something that you all worked on together even up until the last few months or so, and maybe even beyond that. So from that perspective, kind of talk about his stance on that and what you all were working on and what you continue to work on as part of establishing and sustaining his legacy.
Yeah, well, relative to black business growth and development in the city, Bernal was right there on the front lines with us, pushing against the status quo and really trying to compel the economic development leadership, the government leadership to fully engage and prioritize the growth of black businesses for the good of the growth of the Memphis economy. And Bernal wrote about it a lot in editorials, and he really, was one to do research and due diligence to make his points. And so he was right there with us when we did the press conference at the National Civil Rights Museum 3 years ago. I was just looking at that picture today. Wow. He was a part of helping organize the Business Contracting Consortium, which is a new organization that's working to specifically try to make that push more organizational,
right?
And of
BCC.
course through Best in Black Awards, which I think is probably his hallmark contribution in this particular vein, where he realized that a lot of black businesses in Memphis across various industries and segments weren't necessarily getting the exposure and awareness that they should, and decided to uplift and honor them. And so that legacy is deep and broad, and I think will live on for a very long time.
You are listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. So not only did this brother live this existence, he worked this existence. I mean, he pushed this thing, because the Best in Black, being a part of that for the last couple of years, I mean, man, that was amazing.
Yeah,
DC, that was amazing.
Yeah, seeing it grow from an idea to where it is now, I think, is just a testament to his entrepreneurialism, his vision, and his leadership, to continue to broaden and expand the categories, to bring on sponsors like the largest bank in town and get buy-in from them, and to provide that recognition. And one of the things that's always rewarding when you see the event occur is the pride that those nominees and the winners take in being recognized and acknowledged and supported and encouraged. And that is everything that Bernal was about.
Doc, right quick, Eric, I want to ask you something. I was just in D.C. with Bernal back during the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus Leadership Conference, and he was just elevated to a vice presidential spot on the NNPA, the National Newspaper Association. And what will him leaving us, what will this do to not only local media, but to media all over the country?
Well, I think it's a terrible loss. I mean, Bernal was a publisher in the old model. So much media now is corporate. So what you get are people who come in, they're climbing the ladder of Gannett or Scripps or whatever media company. Here's a guy who was invested, who had a point of view, who cared about that point of view, and used Tri-State and his media appearances to support that point of view. And that was the old model of a local publisher of a local newspaper.
It was organic.
It was organic, and they were out there, and they were fighting for what they believed in, whatever that was. And so I think, he was a real force in terms of articulating a vision for African American community in Memphis, business-wise, all kinds of issues. And that's a hugely important thing in the community, and that it's locally owned and locally based, and it's someone who knows this community, and that's a loss that's really terrible.
One point I want to add to this, and I think it sort of dovetails both what I was talking about and what Eric was talking about, is just the whole notion of Bernal having gone from being an employee of the Tri-State Defender to when the parent company, I think, was looking to sell it or shut it down or whatever the case may have been. He organized a local group of investors to acquire it and to give it new breath and new life and new leadership and local ownership, which, I think, again, goes to his ingenuity, entrepreneurship, and vision, that he saw a need for that publication to continue to exist and to continue to serve the Memphis community, but with a new model and a new set of offerings to the community as well.
But once again, his ascension was also organic. And that seems to be sort of the reverberating clang here, is that everything that he did was organic and it was genuine. Because if I can say one thing about Bernal, from what I'm gathering from you all, just what I know, is that he dealt, when you talk about black business, with everybody. So often people have the tendency to want to deal with just this business or just that one, or these guys make $1 million, or these guys are known all over. He dealt with everybody, no matter how big, no matter how small, whether you were a surgeon's office or whether you were bottle washers. It was important to him that you succeed at whatever it is that you do. And through that sense of organic growth and development is how he maintained his genuineness and how everything he did was so genuine. But let's talk about that a little bit more, because in today's, and kind of translating that over to right now, because we are in a very inauthentic time in our world where we need more Bernals. People that do grow, like you said, newspapers now grow strictly from corporate offices. Points of view are established, and no one has an opposing point of view. How can we preserve this legacy? What are ways that we can preserve this legacy, whether black or white, whatever, of genuineness and organicness to improve where we are as our society? What are some things that we can do to carry on that legacy of what he was about?
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say that's always so impressive about Bernal is he had an opinion, but he had a point of view, and he had an argument. And he could lay out why this was the right thing to do, why he believed that. And when we would have him on the show I do on WKNO,
right.
he would, I swear, every time he would open my eyes because he could articulate a point of view, not just because he could say, this is what it should be, period. That's not what Bernal did. He articulated why this could happen. He did it in the paper, he did it in his appearances.
And he understood it. He lived it. He wasn't coming to you from some,
And at a time when so much media, so much talk radio, so much TV is just opinion. Just no, you're wrong and I'm right because you're stupid. That wasn't Bernal was he was passionate, but was always incredibly intelligent and thoughtful and articulate about what that point of view he had was.
Well, I recall a conversation he and I had with another Rhodes College alum just maybe 2 years ago at the cigar bar we all like to hang out and frequent downtown. And one of the things, to Eric's point, that Bernal said was that one of his bosses early in his career told him, don't bring me a problem if you don't have a solution already in mind. And so I think, to Eric's point, that was his thought process, was not just to say, here's the problem, but let me think through a couple of scenarios that are solutions. And I know that there was one time when we did the press conference at the Civil Rights Museum, one of Bernal's points was, man, we need to have a plan. We got to have something written down that we can take to the business people and say, this is what we need to do. And there was another segment of the group who were like, well, we don't have time. We're trying to do this. This news is hot. We got to get out in front of this issue. And so we went ahead on with the press conference. And I was actually just thinking yesterday, we should have listened to Bernal and had that plan.
Get out of here.
Because, it's taken us 3 years to get movement and traction, and maybe if we had had that plan, it would have occurred sooner. But, I was just thinking, man, Bernal was really right when he made that point.
Well, you know what? Bernal Smith, great Memphian, great guy, great newspaper man, great friend. Absolutely. You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
My name is Keith Norman, and you are listening to Funky Politics, and whatsoever we do, it's gots to be funky because it's powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
The Tri-State Defender, as we are now known as the new Tri-State Defender, has been in Memphis 65 years. This is our 65th year anniversary. Of course, if you look at me, you know I'm not 65 years old. So I just bought the business back in 2013 after running it 3 years before that from a group that was at the time the largest black-owned newspaper group in the entire country.
Funky Politics back at you, and always powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm DC, sitting here in a chair right along with my co-host, Doc Ward. Doc, what's up?
I don't know. We disappeared for a year. Now we're here. It's time to chill.
Man, you can come up with some stuff off the top of your ear. That's what I'm talking about. What?
It took you to that.
Won't he do it?
After 3 seasons, you finally learned
Whatever.
2 words.
Whatever. Sitting right here, we got some wonderful guests with us. We got Darrell Cobbins, principal of Universal Commercial Realty with us, and also Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Welcome to the program, gentlemen. How are you all?
Well, great. Thank you for having us.
Man, I tell you, we've been out for a minute, but then we come back and we're hit with some pretty sad news, and those of us who are born believers, we know that we'll see our friends again. But Bernal Smith has left this earthly place, and we want to do a little talking about the legacy in which that he, some work that he was doing in our community, and the legacy he's left. And I think the mantle has been passed to all of us, Eric, Darrell, Doc, and myself, and we've got to do something in terms of the education and political climate we have in our country right now. Bernal was big, man. He was a big man on this. He didn't just walk; he talked the talk. He did it all. Eric? I mean, he was on your program several times.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was a regular. And I think about in political climate, the open letter he wrote to Berlin Boyd when it came out that there was
was that not,
there was a contract.
He had cojones on that one, brother.
And he did it in a way that was to say, look, one, whether or not technically this is illegal is not the point. Right. It should have been disclosed, and it should have been. We want to hold you to a higher standard. Yeah. And he also did it in a way without insulting Berlin Boyd.
Right.
He did not say you are dumb, you're terrible, you're
right.
the kind of stuff that we hear on cable TV news late at night.
Or Facebook.
Or on Facebook. It was not a personal insult. It was a, look, here's why we want to hold you to a higher standard as an elected official. Here's why I think you owe us more. And I think that really spoke to Bernal's character and the way he approached the things he advocated for.
Yeah, it was more like a call to consciousness. Right. And the things that he did, when you think about it, were our conscience. I mean, as and I'm saying this as relates to black business development, that's not just a black person's issue. That's an issue of any person, particularly if you live in a community where 70% of your people are black. It should be in your conscience to raise the level of black business participation. I mean, it should be. And through his media group, Tri-State Media Group, and then, of course, in particular, Tri-State Defender, he was able to get his message out and really, educate people on how we live and how we should be living.
Right.
Right. But at this point now, and I would like to ask you, Darrell, because I know you've been a champion of African American business for a long time. Without Bernal's conscience there, because I know Tri-State Defender will go on and on and on, but without him there, what will be the responsibility of all of us as far as keeping that level and sort of closing ranks to make sure that we stay afloat and rise, actually?
Right. Well, I think we are charged with following his example. He was, of course, on Eric's show frequently, and he was on a host of others in town where his opinions and thoughts were sought out for reasons that we all know of his intellect, of his knowledge and experience and his acumen. But when you look at him as an exemplar, what you see is an individual who was not afraid.
No.
He was intelligent and thoughtful and did his due diligence in terms of making his points and arguments for whatever the particular issue was. And he was constructive. He was not a destructive individual in the sense of tearing people down or tearing down or being vicious with his pen and his voice, but he was always constructive and looking to provide solutions to challenges that our community faces. And so I think that's the example that we have to carry forward, that he set for us, and that we hope to continue and live on.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. And speaking of those challenges, and I want to really get back, and the business piece is huge, but this guy stepped out from behind the curtain and was saying, look, from a political standpoint, we're not where we ought to be in this community. We're just not. Democrat, Republican. He was on this show several times, and we had a lot of fun with him. And we were calling the cards like they were, Eric and Darrell, and a little bit about the political acumen, because I know he'd be on your show, and there were some things, of course, on the national level right now we're dealing with, and it just blows your mind.
Yeah.
And he stood out there. He stood out on a lot of issues.
Absolutely. And again, did it in a way that was principled and forceful, but I want to help convince you of why my opinion is right and why I want to talk this through with you. I don't want to yell at you. I don't want to finger point at you. But he called people out, and and it was an impressive thing. I think too about he was able. Think about the package, the whole series of stories that Tri-State did when the aquifer issue came up, and he reframed for me that whole issue of the aquifer, which personally I thought was, why are they doing this? This sounds dangerous. He reframed it, and the other folks who work from it at Tri-State, as an issue of social justice, of the risks. I mean, he likened it to Flint and the water supply, and that if that aquifer gets polluted, it's colorblind. Pollution is colorblind. Pollution is going to get into the aquifer, and it's going to pollute everyone. And so he also wrote about that in a way that was about the whole community. And I thought that was just, again, another example of just his broad and sense of advocacy for the community.
I think that's a great point, Eric. And just thinking back about a lot of his writings and a lot of his appearances, he would always place the African American community issue within the context of Memphis as a whole and what's best for Memphis.
Yes.
And I could just think of countless examples of when he would, make a point and show that by uplifting the African American community by virtue of that 70%,
right,
that Memphis is uplifted
right.
as a result, and that's what we all should be striving for and interested in.
The net positives go up, then our net negatives, of course, they should be reduced. And like I said again on this show, Doc, we've sat across from him several times,
right,
sparring with him over the Clinton campaign and how that thing turned out and so forth. And it was amazing. I mean, this guy, and you just pick things off the top of his head, and like, come on, Bernal, where'd you get that from? But I mean, hey,
but you knew they came from a place where came from a place of thought.
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
Developed thought.
That's right.
And not just off the cuff, and not just people tend to do, thinking with your emotions or thinking with some other things going on. It was actually something that was well thought out, no matter how emotional the issue was. If we from anything from the protest on the bridge to the election results or anything that's going to trigger a lot of emotions from people, and even no matter what it was, even taking a knee, something we didn't talk about on the show, but we talked about outside. Right. It's always done with a lot of thought and a lot of thought put into it.
I want to make sure that we pay particular attention to not only what he did, but he had a hell of a support staff at the Tri-State Defender.
Oh, yeah.
I don't ever want us to forget the fact that he didn't do it all by himself.
That's right.
He was a publisher. He was an out front guy, but there were a lot of other working parts at the Tri-State Defender, and I think as a part of our community, we owe that publication our support as we go forward. Even without Bernal in our city, in our midst anymore, he's still with us.
You know how I say it?
Absolutely.
If you loved what he did and love what he stood for, get your subscription.
That's right.
There you go, brother.
If you don't, you're a hater.
One other thing I want to make sure that we take stock of is Bernal's father, who he was named after, who was a long-serving executive at the Boys and Girls Club here in Memphis for 30-plus years. Wow. And
Mr. Bernal is what we call it.
That's right. And Bernal, I remember him speaking at his father's funeral, and he talked about how his father would take him to the Boys and Girls Clubs with him to play basketball, to get to know the other kids. And so he, came from a great middle-class background, was really going into a lot of rough areas and building relationships and probably seeing and being developed and socialized in a way that gave him a lens that now you see manifest through a Tri-State Defender, but I'm certain that was cultivated. And he talked a lot about the lessons that his father taught him through his upbringing and through his experience. So I think his father and mother should get a lot of credit for raising a great son.
Wow. Yeah. You are listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Artivism, Best in Blue, Funky Politics, Blues in the Basement, Neighborhood Connect, Riffin' on Jazz, on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN! Artivism, Best in Blue, Funky Politics, Blues in the Basement, Neighborhood Connect, Riffin' on Jazz, on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN! Funky Politics.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network, as we commemorate and celebrate the life, love, and dedication of our dear brother, Bernal Smith. And we'd be remiss if we did not offer our condolences to his wife, his children, his family, as well as to the Tri-State Defender family. And we pray for their strength and understanding during this difficult time. But we also celebrate his life, because one thing about Bernal is that he had a passion for life, for living, and for several causes of which he championed so excellently. And the thing about it is that the genuine nature of his passion for his work in media, as for his work in improving African American businesses and sustainability of businesses, and in political and economic activities, the nature of the passion was often expressed in the way that he did his business. He did it as a man would do it, not buffered by any lunches or special interest or yes men or just a group of people you'd have to talk to, man next to the man. If you saw Bernal and he had room on his schedule, you had a meeting. And if you had a meeting, you had a time to discuss an opportunity. And you possibly had the opportunity to work with him to take that opportunity to the next level and make it happen. Because that's what he was about, making it happen, making dreams happen. In the work of Bernal, we often saw the dream that Martin Luther King talked about and discussed so eloquently when he talked about African American civil and economic empowerment. The Pan-African vision that Marcus Garvey talked about, that was all over Bernal's work, the multi-layering of that African American progress. And the perseverance of Malcolm X's by any means necessary was also mixed in there, as he did not stop and he continued to move forward, always until the job was done. So for that life and for that legacy, we are grateful, because he's given us something to improve upon, to celebrate, and to commemorate. So on behalf of Larry Robinson, DC, and myself and the rest of the KUDZUKIAN family, we say, rest in power, our brother. Your work and your efforts have well done and well received. And we'll see you on the other side.
Funky Politics executive producer Larry Robinson for KUDZUKIAN. Hosted by Darrell DC Catron and Marcus MD Ward. Guest bookings by Miko. Funky Politics recorded at KUDZUKIAN Studio. Directed, produced, recorded, and distributed by KUDZUKIAN.